So imagine you're typing out this like deeply personal, super urgent text message to someone,
Okay, yeah.
and you're asking for advice on a major life crisis. You pour your heart into it, you hit send, and then you immediately put your phone on airplane mode.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you toss it into a desk drawer, shut it, and just walk out of the room.
I mean, you would never expect an actual resolution from doing that. By walking away and just, shutting off the receiver, you've completely blocked any chance of getting the return signal.
Exactly. Yet, according to the source we're analyzing today, that is precisely how most of us handle our attempts to seek guidance,
Right.
whether we call it prayer, meditation, or just, asking the universe for a sign. Welcome to another deep dive. To you, our listener, the learner, we are so thrilled to have you with us today.
Absolutely. So glad you're here.
Our mission today is to unpack this really fascinating address that was originally delivered at a local congregation's Sunday service. And the speaker did something, well, highly analytical.
Yeah, they really did the heavy lifting here.
They combed through roughly 100 different articles from a global faith magazine called the Liahona, and they distilled all of that collective wisdom into this highly practical system for personal and spiritual growth.
And just to give a little context here, the Liahona is a publication primarily read by members of the Latter-day Saint faith.
Right.
But the distillation the speaker creates from those pages is it's fascinating because it functions as this incredibly universal framework. It's essentially a masterclass in building resilient habits, honing your intuition, and translating abstract beliefs into very concrete actions.
So the speaker opens the address with this brilliant core metaphor. They frame life as a voyage through rough seas.
A very classic but effective image.
Oh, for sure. And in this framework, the Spirit acts as the wind in your sails. The scriptures, or, your core texts of truth, serve as the compass keeping you oriented. And revelation is the lighthouse guiding you back to your ultimate destination, which they define as returning to the Father.
It creates this beautifully complete system. I mean, you have propulsion, you have direction, and you have a destination. But the speaker doesn't just linger on the poetic metaphors. The entire focus of this address is on the actual physical training and the psychological practice required to sail the ship.
Like, how do you actually calibrate the compass?
Exactly. How do you position yourself to catch that wind?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to navigate this voyage, the speaker argues we first need to make sure our communications equipment is actually receiving a signal.
Which goes back to your text message analogy.
Right. We tend to treat prayer or deep reflection as this one-way street. We ask for things, we list our anxieties, we express gratitude, and then we metaphorically throw the phone in the drawer.
We treat the act of asking as the entirety of the exercise. But the speaker argues that prayer isn't just about vocalizing a request. It is fundamentally about preparing your mind and your environment to actually receive the answer.
Right, because if you aren't actively listening for the notification ping, sending the message was functionally useless.
Exactly. And to fix this broken feedback loop, the address suggests a specific training regimen. And it's all about practicing following intuition.
Okay, how so?
Well, the source claims that answers often arrive as what they call a still small voice or a sudden quiet urge to take a specific action. So the practice is to pay attention to those tiny, seemingly insignificant prompts and act on them immediately.
The examples provided in the source are so relatable, too. Like, you might just be going about your day and get a sudden feeling that you should, send an encouraging message to a specific friend.
Yeah, or you walk into a crowded room and feel an inexplicable pull to sit in a specific empty seat.
And the training dictates that you just do it.
Yeah.
You bypass all that cognitive friction, that overthinking, and you just execute the action.
Right, and you couple that with a habit of mini prayers throughout the day, which, psychologically speaking, functions a lot like a grounding technique to keep you present. And by doing that, you start tuning your mind to constantly receive.
It's almost like tuning an old analog radio dial through layers of heavy static, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to lock onto a specific frequency. But I got to say, I have to push back a little on the practical application of this.
Oh, how so?
Well, how do we practically separate this divine intuition from our own random, everyday mental noise? I mean, sometimes I get an intense, quiet urge to eat an entire pizza at midnight.
Right.
And I'm fairly certain that is not a divine prompt from the universe. So how do we know what is a genuine signal and what is just our own biology or, our subconscious?
What's fascinating here is that the source anticipates that exact confusion.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The framework suggests that the validity of the intuition is proven through the action itself. You don't actually get the luxury of knowing with 100% certainty before you make a move.
So you just have to jump in.
Kind of.
Funny.
By trusting these small positive prompts as if they were divine responses, you begin to build what the speaker calls a faith muscle.
Okay, so the action acts as the filter. You step out, you test the signal, and you observe the result.
Precisely that. If the prompt leads to something constructive, like something that helps another person or brings clarity, you've gathered data.
Right.
Over time, through this process of trial and error, your brain literally learns to recognize the specific emotional and psychological texture of that frequency. You learn the distinct difference between a prompt that elevates your environment and a random ego-driven pizza craving.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
But, realizing that you've heard a signal from a lighthouse doesn't magically transport your boat across the water.
No, it doesn't.
You still have to pick up the oars and row, which shifts this entire dynamic from passive listening to actual physical exertion.
And that physical exertion is the core of the speaker's definition of faith. The source is very clear that belief is not just, sitting in a chair agreeing with a concept.
Right, it's not just intellectual agreement.
Exactly. Faith is defined as the conviction that divine help is activated specifically when we act.
The word when is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It really is.
God's power, according to this framework, connects with our physical effort. If faith is a muscle, it operates on the exact same biological principles as our physical muscles.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't subject a muscle to resistance, it atrophies, it shrinks.
Right.
A muscle only grows stronger under the load of action and the stress of resistance.
And the anecdotes pulled from the Liahona articles really illustrate this physics of belief perfectly. There's this one story of a family physically walking an immense distance just to attend church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were putting in a literal bodily effort to match their internal conviction. And there's another narrative about a youth putting in this grueling, sustained effort to overcome a severe hearing impairment.
So the physical manifestation reinforces and actually builds the internal belief.
Exactly. And to actively build this muscle, the address outlines a practice called taking a leap of faith.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, it involves setting a goal that forces you to step into the unknown, where you really cannot guarantee the outcome. The specific example they highlight is reaching out to repair a long-avoided, broken relationship.
That is heavy resistance.
It is. You make the first move toward reconciliation without knowing how the other person is going to react.
And alongside that outward leap, they pair it with an inward practice, right?
Yeah.
Something they call sharpening the saw.
Yes. And this addresses the sheer exhausting busyness of modern life. It requires setting aside dedicated time, perhaps just once a week, to completely step back from the grind.
Like a hard reset.
Exactly. You intentionally lower your cognitive load, you replenish your spiritual power, and deliberately plan out your study or how you can serve others in the coming days. You're basically aligning your long-term goals with your daily granular choices.
Okay, let me ask a probing question about that first training, though.
Yeah.
The leap of faith one.
Yeah.
Let's say we view faith as a muscle, and we decide to subject it to the heavy resistance of repairing a toxic relationship. We send the vulnerable text. We offer the apology. We do all the grueling emotional work.
Right.
What happens if the other person completely rejects us? I mean, does the source imply that if we just put in enough physical and emotional effort, it guarantees a clean, happy outcome?
That is a critical distinction to make, because it's where the psychology of expectation often breaks down for people.
Yeah, we expect a reward for our effort.
Exactly. But the source does not imply that effort mathematically equals a perfect external outcome. The promise is that divine power connects with our effort to give us the strength to endure the difficulty.
Oh.
If you reach out and are harshly rejected, the relationship wasn't magically fixed, but the growth occurred internally. You subjected your vulnerability and your willingness to forgive to heavy resistance, and those internal capacities grew stronger.
Oh, wow. So that internal strength is what equips you for the rest of the voyage, regardless of the external weather.
Exactly. The boat's hull gets stronger, even if the storm continues to rage.
I love that. But building all this internal strength naturally pushes you to look outward, right?
Okay.
You can't just build a reinforced boat to sit isolated in the harbor.
No, the logic of this framework demands that you look at the other struggling sailors on the water.
Right. True growth doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Exactly. Spiritual growth, according to the speaker, ultimately deepens through external connection. It's an outward pivot towards service and love. The source shares this really compelling story of a doctor who completely disrupts his own schedule to go out of his way to help a strange woman.
And what's the takeaway there?
It illustrates this recurring feedback loop in the address. Serving others is the most reliable mechanism for bringing profound personal joy and psychological resilience back to the individual.
The phrase a speaker uses for this training is to become an angel, which, I don't know, it sounds a bit lofty, maybe a little disconnected from reality, but the application they suggest is intensely grounded.
It is. It demands an incredibly proactive stance. The speaker emphasizes that individuals shouldn't just sit around waiting for official church programs or, like, organized corporate volunteer drives to do good.
Right, you don't wait for permission.
Exactly. The mandate is to proactively scan your environment for ways to answer someone else's prayer. You basically become the notification ping for their unanswered text message to the universe.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. To explain how we should scan our environments, the source uses an incredible modern analogy.
Oh, the smartphone one.
Yes. The speaker says we should observe the needs of our neighbors and our coworkers with the exact same level of hyper-attention that we use when we are looking at our smartphones.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of our daily habits, that is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. We are habitually glued to our screens. We notice every subtle notification badge, every slight drop in battery percentage, every new piece of information on a feed.
Right. And the speaker asks, what would happen if we took that exact same intensity, that exact same granular focus, and applied it to the faces and lives of the people physically standing in front of us?
You would immediately notice the subtle tension in a coworker's jaw, or the quiet exhaustion of a neighbor who is usually upbeat. But the source insists that the most critical place to apply this smartphone-level attention isn't out in the neighborhood or the office.
No, it's actually inside your own home.
Which is notoriously the hardest place to sustain that kind of attention.
Absolutely. We tend to spend our best observational energy masking our flaws for strangers, and then we bring our exhausted, depleted selves back to our families.
So true. And to combat this, the source recommends establishing family councils.
Yes. And this isn't just, sitting around the dinner table casually chatting.
Right. It's a specific intentional practice of creating a scheduled space where anxieties, worries, and struggles can be discussed openly.
From a psychological standpoint, this is a brilliant mechanism for creating safety, because when you schedule dedicated time to discuss stress, you take the emotional charge out of passing interactions.
You aren't trying to resolve a massive conflict while rushing out the door in the morning with your keys in your hand.
Exactly. A family council makes the home a structured, supportive space where everyone feels seen. It ensures that the process of becoming an angel actually starts in your own living room.
But let's be realistic for a second. Being hyper-observant of everyone's needs and constantly serving others is an incredibly fast track to burnout.
Oh, absolutely.
You cannot continually pour water from an empty cup. Sustaining that kind of outward output requires you to fiercely protect your inward input.
And that necessity brings us to the final components of the speaker system, which function as an input and output loop.
Which are?
Well, you have to continually calibrate your compass through the study of truth, and you must ruthlessly curate the environment in which you are trying to operate.
Let's look at how they approach studying truth, specifically using the scriptures as that compass. The source strongly warns against treating reading as a passive checklist.
Right. It's not about reading a page, checking a box on a reading plan, and going to sleep.
A compass provides zero value if you just stare at the needle without knowing what destination you're trying to find. The training required here involves writing down a highly personal, specific question before you even open a book or begin your study.
Right. Instead of passively scanning words, you write down something like, how does the principle in today's reading apply to this specific gnawing worry I have about my career?
And by doing that, you're actively priming your brain's reticular activating system to hunt for a specific pattern or signal in the text.
You shift from a passive consumer to an active investigator. And the source suggests taking this cognitive engagement a step further through a practice they call creative recording.
Okay, this part surprised me.
When you receive a spiritual impression, an insight, or an answer to that question, the speaker advises against just jotting it down in a standard journal entry. They suggest using drawings, writing poetry, or composing a song to capture the feeling.
Right, and I have to ask, why require that level of effort? Like, what is the practical difference between a quick journal entry and drawing a picture of an insight?
It really comes down to how our brains encode memory. Translating an abstract, fleeting emotion into a concrete, creative medium requires deeper cognitive processing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it utilizes dual coding theory. When you force yourself to sit with an insight long enough to draw it or rhyme it, you are anchoring that memory significantly deeper into your neurological pathways.
So when the rough seas inevitably hit again, that anchor holds much firmer than a hastily scribbled note you've already forgotten.
Exactly. You are literally building a stronger anchor through the friction of creativity.
That is so powerful. Now, the final piece of this system deals with the environment we're anchoring ourselves into. The source brings in a quote from the author C.S. Lewis, who stated, "There is no neutral ground in the universe."
It's a very uncompromising concept. Lewis argued that every square inch of space and every split second of time is claimed by one force or another. There is no Switzerland in the landscape of the mind.
Okay, I have to challenge the absolutism of that.
Go for it.
Really. No neutral ground whatsoever. What about watching a completely random, silly internet video of a cat falling off a couch?
Right.
It's certainly not spiritually uplifting, but it's not malicious or evil either. How is a harmless distraction not neutral ground?
This raises an important question about the economics of mental real estate. The source's argument is that our media consumption, our friend groups, and our daily environments are constantly influencing our baseline frequency. Even the silly cat video occupies mental space and time that could have been utilized to sharpen the saw, connect with a family member, or listen for intuition. It isn't that the video itself is morally corrupt, but a steady, unchecked diet of minor distractions slowly numbs our ability to hear that still, small voice we discussed earlier.
I see. It functions as static on the radio dial.
Exactly.
It might not be a malicious, intentional broadcast designed to harm you, but it is still static, and it is still preventing you from locking onto the actual signal.
Which is why the required training for this final element is a media decluttering. The individual must audit their life and ask what elevates my capacity to hear intuition and what hinders it, and then you have to ruthlessly eliminate the static.
You curate your environment by filtering what you consume, but also by what you project back into it.
Yes. The source notes that being a model of faith in your environment doesn't require grand, sweeping gestures. It is found in simple consistency. Maintaining a sincere work ethic at your job or practicing basic, unglamorous kindness in your kitchen.
You essentially become the lighthouse for someone else who is currently navigating a rough sea.
That's a great way to put it.
So, we have this comprehensive blueprint. Tuning into intuition through action, building the muscle of faith through effort, pivoting outward to serve proactively, actively engaging with truth, and ruthlessly curating our mental environment.
It is a robust system. But the speaker concludes the address with a vital reality check that contextualizes all of this effort. Inviting this kind of growth and practicing these habits does not suddenly make life smooth.
Right. The summary of this deep dive is not a fairy tale. The source makes a profound admission here. The difficult challenges will still happen.
Always.
The rough seas do not magically flatten out into a sheet of glass just because you learned how to use the compass.
Then the natural question is, why undertake all this rigorous psychological and spiritual training at all?
Right, what's the point?
Yeah. Because practicing these elements fundamentally changes how those inevitable challenges feel. The source claims that as you build these habits, you develop a deep, anchoring sense of peace and joy that just clicks into place better than it ever did before.
Wow.
The storm outside the boat is still raging, but the integrity of your hull is sound. You understand how to read the compass. You trust the light coming from the lighthouse. The paralyzing panic is replaced by a quiet, resilient confidence.
The training changes you, it doesn't change the weather.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? The speaker ends their address with a very direct challenge, and it's a challenge we want to pass directly to you. Look at these practices we've discussed today. Pick just one of them and commit to it.
Just one. Don't try to overhaul your entire life by tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that never works.
Maybe your one thing is acting on a tiny, intuitive prompt to text a friend today. Maybe it's observing a coworker with smartphone-level attention to see what they actually need. Maybe it's writing down a specific question before you read something you hope to learn from. Just pick one weight and start building the muscle.
Don't try to boil the ocean. Just adjust your sails a fraction of a degree today. And as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something that pushes the boundaries of the source material we've explored today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the source is right, that faith and resilience function exactly like a muscle, and if we know from basic biology that muscles can only grow stronger when they are subjected to heavy, uncomfortable resistance. Does that mean we should stop hoping for our obstacles to disappear?
Oh, that's interesting.
Should we instead view the hardest, most frustrating, and most uncomfortable parts of our lives right now not as a punishment, but as the exact gym equipment we require to grow?
I mean, adopting that perspective changes the entire nature of the voyage. The waves crashing against the hull aren't there to sink you, they are there to teach you how to sail.
What a thought to carry with you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring. We will catch you next time.